and welcome to the Tennessee Informer. Thank you for being with us tonight. Tonight, Monty Fritts joins us from the trail to give us an update on the campaign as well as legislation, because the session is ongoing and he's got some important legislation. How you doing tonight, Monty?
I'm good, Dave. How are you tonight?
Okay, I appreciate you being with us. I know you're swamped. I know you're burning up that road.
Yeah, we've been keeping it pretty hot. Had a little bit of a break tonight. Wednesday nights, we try to respect people's church nights and all, and that gives me a time to read bills, and so that's it works out pretty well that way. But we were in Tipton County last night. Great crowd, great liberty-loving group of people out there. And got in a little bit late this morning, but it's been kind of a common thing for me to get in, a couple, 3 nights a week at 12, 1, 2 o'clock in the morning. It's just part of outworking the competition.
Absolutely. Well, Tipton County, that's not too far from Memphis.
That's right. Yeah. Down past Brownsville and up into Covington, and we were at a little place just past Covington that we met last night. Great get together.
Steve Gill didn't come out and see you?
No, I think he was still trying to get the paper bag off his head where he hyperventilated about the first poll. I think at some point in time he slobbered through it and it broke. The bag broke.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, we should have some fun with that. Hey, I tell you, I didn't know that poll thing was going to go. And, I heard him hyperventilating and heavy breathing and stuff somebody sent me a copy of the Todd Starnes show. And then Todd did his 990 poll, and we did pretty well in that too. Now, I did say this in Tipton County last night. I would say it to you. I was a little disappointed in the numbers, to be honest with you, because it was showing us, 55, 60%, and Marcia 35, and John, he's somewhere in the single digits. He's probably having strong thoughts about doing something else for the next 4 years, I'd imagine. But I was a little disappointed. I thought the numbers should have been much more heavily toward us, because when you consider the message and the engagement that we do with the lack of engagement and the lack of message that both the other candidates have, I've got some work to do. I need to work a little bit harder, because once you get the liberty and less government message out and you compare that with my tractor tire ran down the hill message that John offers and the silence in the face of questions message that Marcia offers when asked about her big pharma ties, I think it's a hands down thing. I think they're in for a really big upset, and I don't mean that in an arrogant, cocky way at all. I'm certain that the polyester too tight britches crowd is probably sewn up with the establishment, but I think the blue jeans and the overalls and the camouflage are sick of these career politicians. They're sick of weak males. They're sick of feckless females. We're sick of people sending $5 billion for refugee welfare and $3.5 billion to get us tied up in some kind of crazy UN scheme, and voting for these quad pack agreements that get us militarily obligated to places like India. John voted for that. I don't know. I don't know who tells these people what to vote. I wish they'd just read the bills and vote the way the constituents want them to, and the Constitution instructs, but that's not the case. Again, long thing there, but you just look at the constitutional score. And most of our congressmen, or congress people, I guess, it's horrible. They score in the 50s and 60s and 70s, and I hear them say things like, well, we had to make a deal to get things done. Those are the things we shouldn't be getting done.
Right.
We're having to violate the Constitution. Keep your danged oath. Stop that stuff. Quit sending so much of our money overseas. But I digress. I'll stop with that.
And the amounts they're spending are dangerous. I mean, you just can't keep this up. We've heard it our whole life, but you really can't just keep it up. It's gotten worse. I mean, if you look how much debt's been added just in the last several years.
Well, I'll tell you, Dave, I think these are the same people that have done nothing. I saw John Rich today was up in D.C. standing up for people in Cheatham County because, TVA had overreached. And TVA's made some good decisions. They made, I think, a good decision this week They wouldn't have made that if illegitimate Joe had not been in the office, but illegitimate Joe might not have been in the office if our two senators hadn't voted to certify the election. Tennesseans died as a result of that little coup d'etat that Joe Biden pulled on the country. And there's a lot of people got some repenting and some judgment to face for that. But John Rich is talking about, eminent domain and coming on people's property with all kitted out with vests and everything. And 85-year-old women being scared to death by these group of armed thugs that work for TVA coming on the property. But it's not just DC. And it's not just the failure of the John Roses and the Marsha Blackburns of the world to not exercise their constitutional oversight authority over US TVA. And we made these horrible decisions and got ourselves in energy trouble. Yes, we're making better decisions now. I applaud them for that. But you have to have a country music star get engaged. Jody and I sent letters to TVA and, but most of our politicians just checked out on it federally, and most of them in the state, and didn't stand up for the people. And, I think we're expecting to. We did an energy policy my first year. We restructured the energy policy council my second year. Last year, we tried to move the reporting in the right place. I'm hoping we're going to be able to do that finally this year. I got some pushback from Lee's administration, but we've just allowed some really horrible decisions to be made, and not to just go on with it, but I'll give you one good example. I voted for the Transportation Modernization Act in my first year, I think it was. And it had some bad stuff in it. It had some good stuff in it, I thought. And I'm okay if you want to build a lane and charge me to drive in it. If you provide all the capital and all that, I'm really okay with that. But we put an additional tax on hybrid vehicles and electric vehicles. And certainly if you drive a Tesla, you should have to contribute to road maintenance just like me in a gasoline or a diesel, and my 26 or 27 cents per gallon tax that does that, right? But we also put in the non-plug-in hybrids. And so I'm trying to correct that, because I know all of us had heard from our constituents that we shouldn't be double taxing people. That whether it's a Toyota, a Ford, a Kia, or whatever, in these Synergy Drive type hybrids, which every Toyota Camry, which is, I think, the most popular selling car in the country, is now from 25 on, is a hybrid, and it's a non-plug-in hybrid. So you have to buy gasoline to make electricity to use the hybrid version. Anyways, so I offered this. I'm thinking it makes sense. F&A puts a $10 million fiscal note on it. That scares all the people that think that they need your money more than you do to death. And the governor's people had worked against it. To TDOT's credit, they'd called me and said, "Hey, Rep Fritts, we're gonna work against this bill." I knew they would. They really, honest to God, think they deserve your money more than you do. And we said that in committee. I didn't say that, but when we presented the bill, it was like, well, it sounds like a good idea, but we really need this money. And I offered, and trying to plead with folks, a lot of these cars are on the road. The fiscal note said 147,000 of them in Tennessee. And so we're charging those people not only 27 cents a gallon for the fuel they put in their car, but now we're charging them $100 every time they register it. We're double taxing. If I were Toyota, I would be highly ticked off at this, because we as a government have biased against the purchase of almost their entire fleet of automobiles, the cars.
That's a good point. I hadn't thought about that.
Well, I talked about that yesterday, and guess what? I got 2 Republicans to vote with me, 2, and Afton Bain. And yes, and the rest of them voted against it. So what they were in essence saying is, we're okay in double taxing these Tennesseans. I offered this through committee and try to be professional with it, and I love them, but they're like little Stepford wives that they have to keep taking the money. And I said, really, the fiscal note does sting a little bit at $10 million. I get that, but you need to look at this the other way. that's not a fiscal note of depriving the government
Right.
some of
Right.
its taxes. It's that we have double taxed Tennesseans to a tune of $10 million a year, like 9.5. And I don't know, I was disappointed. That mentality, that's part of what I want to turn around as governor. Is
That's a
these
whole lot
departments.
less than lot less than we gave to Ford, a lot less than we gave to the Titans.
Yes,
Uh,
or
and
the Smokies last year.
Yeah, or the 7.2 million that we gave to Catholic Charities just a few years ago to bring in all the illegals. I mean, that's the kind of
We're
things we do.
we're hurting for leadership. I I had, and I promise I'll stop after this one. We had the Tennessee Conservative News reported, if it's correct, well, I'll put an if in front of it. If it's correct, that Governor Lee wants to make the Department of Homeland Security an independent
I saw that.
commissioner-led agency, right?
I saw
Well,
that.
if you read that article, but if you read that article, if what they have in it's correct, based on the article, and I'm pulling this string here in Nashville, but based on the article, they want that new organization to be exempt from um, transparency, from public records. So you have to ask yourself the question: if you have people who are armed, badges and guns, and they arrest people, why would you ever want to exempt them from public records? And we are neck deep in the federal government having lists of names of celebrities and politicians, apparently, that have done vile, ungodly things with little children and women. And it's reported that we can't disclose all that because the whole system will break.
Break it.
Break it. Break it.
If that's the case, it's already broke.
These satanic people, if they are trafficking children, some of these reports even suggest that they get into these satanic rituals. It's the whole Molech and Baal worship thing that's being practiced by some of these people. That breaks my heart to think that. But we're protecting somebody. And it sure seems like that somebody has the leverage on politicians to get them to do what they want them to do. And so with all that, and the fact that we aren't lining these people up and marching them into courtrooms to convict them and then sentence them to death, the fact that we're not doing that, and we would even think about opening up a new law enforcement entity without public record.
No.
These people they're tone deaf beyond repair.
With all those pedophiles, we probably need a millstone militia to deal with those people. And I think you know what that's a reference to. I've got some questions in the chat for you, so I'm going to start at the top one, and I'll make some of these. I may not quite get them right, but okay. One question is, what about elimination of the statutes that the counties used to extort us out of our true title to our land and property tax? And I'm not sure exactly. You may understand that more.
Yeah, so the news will report that Ron DeSantis is doing something, and everybody jumps on. Well, if Florida, we can do it. And I'm not picking on the person's asking that question, but we do have a constitution that allows for in Tennessee right now allows for the local governments to collect property tax. I have a bill to deal with that. I don't remember the number. Go to my website, you'll find it. It's clearly described, and it starts addressing the taxation against unrealized capital gains, which is a problem constitutionally for me, it should be for all of us. And it starts to address this whole being evicted from your house for delinquency of taxes in Tennessee. I think to remove property taxes altogether is going to require a constitutional amendment. That's what I think. But we've taken steps I think we can right now until that takes place. So I know it's a problem. We are trying to deal with it. And I hope some of the energy from your audience will get on to their state reps and their state senators, because they are not going to want to pass this. It's because it's mine, and most of them have endorsed Marcia for governor. I think that's a real problem.
Yeah,
I really do. And we'll see how that trends, but I know how some of these people think. And the other part of it is they think that your dollars are their dollars to spend, that the agenda of Bill Lee is more important than you keeping money in your pocket. I just don't think that way.
Well, one of their answers, well, he got 7 million votes, so the people elected him. So we've got to do whatever he wants. It's insane. Another question, okay, or another comment. Our district attorney generals need to be held to a higher ethical standard as to the laws written and not just necessarily opined. And I'm reading from that. So do you have any thoughts on district attorneys? I've done a little bit of digging. I think they probably have a little too much power, and they're definitely
Yeah,
in there too long.
I'm not crazy about the 8-year elections. I don't know what the entire question there is, but we have gotten away from constitutional adherence and gotten to case law, and we find ourselves in U.S. law and in Tennessee law departing from what the standard, the Constitution is, and getting to what the opinions or what a judge has opined, and that's problematic, and it's hard on the republic.
Absolutely. And just in general, I know the Department of Education is a problem, but TDEC, I think there's a lot of the different organizations that probably need to be reformed. Recalibrated is the word you use. So do you have any ideas on some other agencies or commissions that you think need recalibrating?
All of them. Number one, if you hire me to be the governor of the state of Tennessee, we will not be adding departments. We're going to move the other direction. I know Governor Lee promised that. He's lied about it. He has not done it. Even if he doesn't add this one, he's not kept this promise. Many of us were excited to vote for him because he was going to reduce the number of 23 department agencies or whatever. We need to reduce that. I think across the board, I think there are some of those commissioners that do better than others. I think that if you can't pass a constitutional test, you have no business holding that job. I spoke with the Tennessee State Employees Association earlier this week, and we've got legislation coming apparently from the administration, whatever an administration bill is. That's what that really is an unconstitutional bill. But they want to kick the TSEA out of any help and in any advisory roles. And I got to tell you, Dave, you and I have both led men, right, as soldiers. I've led men and women in really complex operations. I hear one of the other folks run and talk about the complexity of his operation. I don't know if that's where he had foreigners helping on computer helpline or what, but I can assure you, I understand complex operations. And the leader has to be willing to open his or her door and hear from the people they're leading. Jesus Christ washed the dirty feet of those fishermen that he led. And so there has to be that servant leader aspect of it. I think that's missing in Nashville. I hear it from all the, what I would call the touch labor people, folks that really get the work done in the state of Tennessee, the correctional officers, the workers in DCS, the TDOT workers, not the ones in suits and ties and polyester pants, but the ones that are out getting the work done. They don't feel like anybody's listening to them. And we're going to recalibrate that. I mentioned this somewhere. I spoke the other day in a couple of different places. I think the governor of the state of Tennessee not only needs to have an open door policy to his employees, but he also needs to have one for the public. There ought to be a regular opportunity to just show up in Nashville, whether it's 2 hours or 3 hours or whatever, and come in and get a word with the governor. That ought to be the case. And the governor, rather than sitting in box seats and chasing after all of the celebrity Hollywood and the World Economic Forums, ought to be coming and sitting in downtown Stewart County or downtown Roane County and making himself available in little mini public meetings where folks can come up and express their concerns. The governor does work for those people. So I think those things help. And then the last thing, you've heard me say this before. I met with some legislative liaisons today, nice young men and young women. They are, and they're trying to do a job. But we're going to get rid of that position. We're going to move that legislative liaison over to the governor's helpline because there is not enough hours in the day for an executive in the state of Tennessee to meet with everybody. But we ought to have people that answer the phones and return calls and return emails and collaborate that information that comes in about what Tennessee's doing well, Tennessee government, and what Tennessee government's not doing well. And on a monthly basis, or every 6 weeks or 8 weeks or something like that, every one of those commissioners ought to sit down with the governor and brief him on what's going well and how do we repeat it, and what's not going well and how do we avoid it, or our corrective action plan to correct it. And I mean, that's the way you run a business, is the way you run a manufacturing line. Why wouldn't you do the same kind of thing with government and have an expectation for that? So we're going to make those things happen. It'll be uncomfortable for some of the bureaucrats in Nashville that think they're above you and I, because we are definitely going to calibrate that, brother.
Absolutely. One other question on the AG. So who does the AG answer to? I know he's not elected per se by the people, not in the normal fashion anyway, but who does the AG answer to?
Well, I think all of us answer first to the Constitution. I know that's probably not the answer you're looking for, but I think that's it. And I think if we allow ourselves to get into what we opine or what our opinion is, rather than what just the words of the Constitution say, we get ourselves in trouble. And there are certainly times, I talk a lot about Article 11, Section 12 of the Tennessee Constitution, that second sentence that talks about the General Assembly shall provide for the maintenance, support, and eligibility standards for a system of free public schools. I think that there's a task force needed for that. And, I say task force, I'm not talking about 20 people, but I think there needs to be attorneys and educators and parents and professionals sit down and understand exactly what we think that means, because we don't pay any attention to it today. When shall means must in our Constitution, right? And when you think about what that's saying to us, not only do I think that makes it wrong for us to be using these silly vouchers, and they are silly vouchers, I think it also means that when we're shoving 30 and 40% of the cost for schools back onto the counties, it may be that shall provide for is something that state government ought to be doing rather than the corporate welfare we're practicing. So I had one of my peers from Sevier County, and if I mess the numbers up, it's my fault, not his. But he said that his county was, because of tourism and everything, and again, this is based on what Fred told me, that they pay for 60% plus of the education in their county. And it's like the number 2 or number 3 biggest revenue county in the state, Sevier County is. Right. And, I think we've shoved some of that back, and it's given us room in Nashville to take care of all of our contract buddies and take care. I know that's not popular to say that, but I think it's happening. Part of the education thing, the number one complaint I get from teachers, maybe number 2 complaint, is too much standardized testing. And then when you start to lift that rock a little bit, you see how many companies that we're contracting with for the standardized testing and where those companies are.
I think you froze up on us there just a little bit. Okay, well, hopefully we'll get him back online here. Okay, so those of you in the chat room, do try to put it in a question form, not so much a comment, but do try to put it in a question form. And I can only keep up so much. You back there with us, Monty?
I
back?
am.
All right, great, good to go.
I'm sorry. Whoever heard that? Just let us finish the interview.
Okay. Yeah, I want to, keep it to the time that we agreed to. So we only got about another 5 or 6 minutes. And we lost you part of your when you were finishing up there. We lost part of what you were saying because you froze up.
Yeah, I'll just be succinct with that. I think there's some contracts that we need to look at. I don't think we're managing our contracts very effectively in Nashville. Someone told me we had that's on transportation committee that we had a road project in Tennessee that is 40 years old. Well, let me tell you, if you got a 40-year-old road project, you don't have a road project, you have a jobs program. And the Department of Transportation is not a jobs program for contracts. It is a department that's supposed to keep our roads and airports and all that kind of stuff serviceable.
And I can't see, and I know it's been about 10 years now since they passed the gas tax, but I don't think they finished a lot of those projects. Certainly not out in the rural areas. They didn't finish those projects.
And many of our, I'm on the road a lot, and the condition of our rest areas are atrocious. Some of them are an embarrassment to the state of Tennessee and how we've allowed them to become. Those should be little oases of what Tennessee's proud of across the state, and they should be little economic engines. Tourism's a huge thing to us. We do well at that. We could probably amplify that by just having our rest areas on 40 and 75 and 24, et cetera, wherever we have a rest area, by keeping it up and taking a little bit different approach rather than just, a place that you can stop. Make it a place where you can be educated, and we can promote American exceptionalism and the Tennessee Constitution and what makes us the greatest state in the Union.
I think part of that recalibration has to be, you already mentioned the fact that the vouchers are unconstitutional, but we got this whole Declaration of Rights that's right up in front of that's the first article in our Constitution. And either our elected officials are totally unaware of it or they don't care because they ignore that. If you look at the whole Hughes versus Lee situation, to me, that's a perfect example that they don't care.
They don't care. I'm telling you, the elitists here in Nashville, and some of the ones that are running for office and some of our federal officials, some of the office holders that we have, many of the bureaucrats, really think the average Tennessean is just a cattle in the field that they can milk dry for taxes and not really answerable to them. And I know that sounds extreme, but I see it every day. When you talk to someone who works in Tennessee government, you ask that, because I asked this last week. I said, what is your constitutional authority? Or where can you point me in the Constitution gives you the authority to do this? And the answer from the state employees was, well, I don't know. I promise you. I asked that question in government ops. A nice person to ask the question to, but it's just not a standard for them. And that starts at the top. That starts with our chief executive for the state that doesn't think that it's not about that. His aspirations or goals for whatever he's going to do, and this whole little cabal of dinglings that are running the state right now, it needs to change.
Absolutely. And you're right. It starts at the top, because if he doesn't want to be held accountable, he's not going to hold anybody else accountable.
Yeah, he's so detached. Our veterans budget. You and I are both veterans. We did Veterans Caucus this morning. I'm the House Veterans Caucus chair. We're scratching for funding to help those 100% disabled veterans with their property taxes, right back on the property taxes.
Yeah.
And it changes every year. It's confusing. We only do the 100% disabled, and we can spend money on some of the corporate welfare. It was even said in one of the Veterans Caucus meetings. And I did not hear this. This comes through somewhere through the comptroller's office and from the governor. This was what was reported. It was reported by Senator Briggs said this, because he was an Army veteran as well. That the discussion was had that if there wasn't enough money for the voucher increase this year, that veteran services may have to give some of that money up.
And Briggs said that.
Well, that's what I heard. Yeah,
that does not shock me a bit. That does not shock me a bit. Even though he's a veteran, that doesn't shock me.
No, not Briggs. Briggs was saying that conversation comes from somewhere in the state leadership. That wasn't Richard's plan.
Oh, okay. That really wouldn't shock me, but okay.
No, Richard, I'll have to take up for him there, Dave. He has a heart for the veteran. He wants to make sure that we are doing the right thing for the veterans, and I don't think we are. And
Okay, well, good. I mean, then he's not all bad. So anyway, so I want to hit the campaign stuff real quick, because we're just about running out of time here. I know we have somebody on here who's wondering when you'll be back in McNairy County, and I'm sure you don't have your calendar right in front of you, but you've been there before, and I'm, I can get with you later, guy on chat, and we can find out when you'll be in McNairy County again. Any big campaign things coming up in the next little bit?
Yeah, I'm going to Reagan Day or Lincoln Day or whatever in Sevier County that I wasn't invited to tomorrow. A friend of mine up there asked me to come sit with him, so I bought a ticket from him, and I'm going to go. There's a few of these counties, they've already made up their mind, and I had somebody recently tell me he didn't know about me. I don't buy that. I think there's some bias in that, and we're going to take a Trumpian approach at that. There's not a whole lot of things I'm going to pattern Donald Trump after, but I'm not going to tolerate these county leads that think that they're just going to silence this voice. It ain't going to happen. So brace for impact if that's their plan.
Well, now there's one county that already, I guess they hadn't originally invited you, and people made an issue of it, and now you're going there, and you can mention the county if you want.
Yeah, I don't remember. We've probably had a couple of those like that, and then we've had lots, many more though. The good people are just like, they invite us, and we had. It was reported today. A friend of mine in Knox County had actually served in the Guard with a friend of mine. That WBIR, which is one of the big channels in Knoxville, put out a piece about the two candidates running for governor. Well, I got to tell you, WBIR, we're going to be knocking on your door. Just know it's coming, because either you are completely inept at this point if you think there are only two people running for governor for the state of Tennessee, or you are intentionally trying to interfere with an election. And I don't think the FCC allows that. I think that if you start to get into election interference, that's a whole different thing. I certainly hope that's not what's happening in Knoxville. And I realize that many of these big fake news outlets have, their agendas. But I don't think they get to play that way. I think that they have to, equal time might even be something that they have to consider. So we're going to push on some of that stuff hard.
Yeah, well, I know at the county level, the county GOPs, they cannot, they can have you all come one at a time. You don't have to all be there at the same time, but they can't shut down anything they can't have events that they just invite 1, 2, or 2 to, and not invite the other GOP candidates.
Well, now, Dave, all three of us are never going to be on a debate where we're answering questions, because the first time that a hard question comes up and one of the candidates just kind of looks at the person and can't say anything, it's not going to be a good look for them. They're not going to do that.
I know they're going to do everything they can to avoid it. Now, I will say this. So on April 24th in Paris, after the parade, and we've got the fish fry there, we have a place already set aside for a debate. Approximate start time will be 2 or 2:30. We'll get that refined, but all three candidates are invited. Okay, all three Republican, and if we have more Republican candidates by then, we'll invite them as well. But they're all invited, and I've already contacted the Rose campaign. I tried to contact the Blackburn campaign. I didn't get any feedback from them, but I'll do it again. So,
well, I got to tell you, even with Congressman Rose, I love him, but his story about his tractor tire rolling down the hill and defying all the laws of gravity and logic, it just ain't gonna cut it. He's gonna have to answer some questions, and I think they're afraid to do that. I think they're afraid to just allow Joe Tennessean to ask them questions. I think both of them are scared to death of that. And me, I'm going to give you an answer. And in some cases, if you ask me the question, half the room will be spitting mad after I answer. That's okay. You'll know where I stand. Right. And there might be a few questions you ask me where I have to say, I don't know. I hadn't researched that all that well, but let me see if I can find out. But I think people appreciate both of those.
Right. Rather than a BS answer that a lot of them will try to give.
Yeah. We got some big bills coming up. Let me mention that are important. Grocery sales tax is coming up soon. It's going to be, I think, next Wednesday. So any encouragement you can offer your representatives and senators to do that would be great. We've taken a measured approach. It will take the 4% state grocery sales tax off WIC items for everybody. And the grocers will not have to reprogram things. They already know what those items are. So it's a good way to start removing that 4% state grocery tax and leave a little more money in Tennesseans' pockets, which is, as you know, is one of my things I think that we must do. Let
me say something on that too. That not only puts more money back in people's pockets, but it keeps it away from the government to use against us.
Yeah, that's right. That's exactly right. And I will tell you, Dave, I think, it makes people uncomfortable. I interview with anybody. I'll interview with you. And I'm kidding. But sometimes Justin Canute's polite and I'll interview with him. Now, I don't tolerate the rude behavior. I got on him a little bit the other day because he started to act like he'd been raised in the bush by apes again. And I'm just not favorable to that, right? And anyways, it upsets some people when I say this. I really don't care. Vote for one of the other two. If you don't like these words, I promise you, you got two milquetoast candidates you can vote for that they won't say this. We need to stop immigration in the United States of America from every single country. We need to deport every single illegal. I don't care if they're cutting grass, cleaning toilets, working in the Cordell Hall building. I don't care. We need to deport every single one of them.
And our state needs to do everything it can to make them feel unwelcome here.
And we do not, they're human beings created in God's image, but we have no constitutional obligation to educate and medically care for these people. We don't. And we need to start saying no to that. And, Tennessee Conservative reported a couple of weeks ago that we had some illegal that had committed a horrendous violent crime. Well, we led the nation in passing some bills that really harshly deal with illegals who commit violent crimes by using a sentence enhancement of life in prison with no parole. We can deport that person from the state penitentiary just like we can deport them from the city block street here in Nashville. And they're not doing damage and their dirty deeds that they've come here to do in many cases. And anyways, got an 11-year sentence. The judges, the juries, the prosecutorial arms got to man up on this. Everybody's got to get we've given them the tool. The General Assembly and Governor Lee even signed it. They've got the tool. If it's a violent crime committed, or if it's any crime committed with the use of a deadly weapon, they ought to be pushing for life with no parole. And that's going to make a difference on how many illegals come here. They'll go to Alabama. Right. They'll go to Missouri. Yeah. They'll stay away from here. And so we not only need to get rid of the illegals that are here, we need to stop taking new immigrants in, not forever. I have the ship's manifest signature from my great-great-great-grandfather Fritts when he got into Philadelphia in 1739. I know that I have generations that come from Europe, right? I get that. But we've reached what I would refer to as a supersaturation point, that we're losing culture. I read just the other day for the Center for Immigration Studies that we're at like 15.8% of non-U.S. born people in the country right now. In 1970, we were like 4.5%. So we're 3.5 to 4 times maybe what we were then. What that means is the culture, and I tried to explain this to the little Marxist guy, Justin Canute. They can't understand this because they've been dropped too many times. But you can't think like a Marxist. You have to think like an American. You have to think that this is a sovereign land. You have to think that preamble to the Constitution, those first few words, make this an exclusive title, we the people. And it's we the people of these United States, not of every nation. And we must get to that. And these foolish judges that assume that the 14th Amendment makes all the citizens of the world fall underneath the protections of our Constitution, they should have picked a better law school. Yeah. And so we found ourselves, we have an existential threat. And we better confront that, because those values that you and I hold, if you allow, again, created in God's image, but they have a whole different worldview. They'll have a pagan religion, a godless or pagan religion. Yeah. And their views on economics and how you treat one another are not what you and I grew up with. And so at 15.8% of those people in the United States, we are at risk of tipping the scales to the point that we don't recover.
Yep.
And so when these weak men cry and moan and whine, or those corrupt men cry and moan and whine because they're working those people for nothing, they need to sit down and shut up, let ICE do their job. And how about the State Department and those responsible for immigration stopping the H-1B visas? Because
and if we're harsher,
let me say one more thing on that. These people that suggest that the H-1B visa is not hurting the ability of the 25-year-old to get a job, they're out of touch. They're completely out of touch. And we are subjugating young people who have done the right things to not being able to afford rent or housing. I have lots of young people, this is their number one issue. When I go to a campus and talk, it's the number one issue. And we just seem to be too weak to deal with it. We elected let's get rid of all of the illegals. And then within 6 months, you had Republicans start that, well, maybe there needs to be a pathway. The pathway is back across the border.
That's right. Absolutely.
Period.
That's the pathway. The same way they came is the pathway back.
It is. And so it frustrates me because not just the cost, not just the fact that our students are suffering because educational opportunity is lost for the native-born American citizen child, but culturally, we're losing the balance. And to some of my libtard friends that think that they want to live like they do in these third world countries, you should have stayed longer on your visit there, because it's not the social utopia that you think it is.
That you saw in your little gated area that when you went over to your tourist area.
Right.
Another reason we need to be as unwelcoming as possible is because right now our stupid federal government recognizes this thing called anchor babies. Well, we need to be as, like I say, uninviting and unwelcoming as Tennessee so that we get fewer of those anchor babies coming here until that's resolved, or until we grow enough spine to say, well, I don't care. We're not keeping you one way or the other. Second Amendment. Somebody has a Second Amendment question. When I know where you stand on this, but somebody did have one. Let's pop. What about eliminating all statutes that infringe on the right of we the people to bear arms for our defense? And apparently this guy is not familiar with you, but I'll let you answer that.
Yeah, so I really do think, I'm gonna plagiarize somebody else, but all gun laws are unconstitutional. The difference between me and the other candidates is this: I have stood up for our Second Amendment rights. I fought with the establishment here in Nashville on the Hughes v. Lee. We've passed good gun law. I'm carrying good gun law now to try to get us back to what is constitutional. And when the National Firearms Act, which requires you to register and be kept on a list for a short barrel rifle, shotgun, or a suppressor, and you did have to pay a $200 tax just to do that, just to get the privilege to be able to defend yourself. Neither of the other people running did anything to stop it. And that's unacceptable. They're weak on the Second Amendment. And where you stand on the Second Amendment, what you say about magazine capacity and whether I can carry in gun-free zones and all those kinds of things, every single one of them is indicative of where you stand on all my rights. I believe like true Republicans believe. Our Tennessee Republican Party guiding principles is very clear. Our rights come from God. I heard one of my colleagues today, it just ticked me off. I was watching it, waiting on a committee for me to go down, and he said, your rights come from the law. And I'm thinking, there ought to be an ejector button on those seats in committee where they're sent up into the ceiling. That is so profanely stupid to say that.
Sounds like a lawyer.
Our rights do not come from, no, this wasn't a lawyer. Our rights do not come from law. Our rights come from God. If you think something other than that, you're not an American. Our founding document, the anchor to our Constitution, says that we have been endowed by our Creator with certain inalienable rights, and they include, or among these are life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men. You have to believe that to be an American. If you don't believe that, you're less than American. Teddy Roosevelt said, that you're either 100% or you're not at all. And that's the way I view that. And so that topic fires me up to whomever asked the question. I appreciate it, them asking it. But most of the men and women in the General Assembly have some compromise on that.
Yeah.
And any compromise on that Second Amendment question means they'll compromise on everything. Well, perhaps you shouldn't be able to criticize the government in this case. Perhaps you shouldn't be able to worship when there's COVID. Perhaps they say something like Governor Lee was quoted as saying during the COVID pandemic, that we should be ashamed of ourselves for worshiping in churches during that time, that we were being selfish. That's a paraphrase, not a quote. But so the Second Amendment's tremendous. The reason I put so much energy in it, the reason we've tried so hard to keep it in place, it is the defense mechanism that our founders put into that Declaration of Rights, or that Bill of Rights,
Yep.
that become a declaration of do not mess with these things.
And to drive your point home, as far as you being a staunch defender, this is from Worried Man 50. We both know who that is. Anyway, House Bill 1737 by Fritts is the best Second Amendment restorative bill in years to be offered. And that comes from somebody who is a staunch defender of the Second Amendment, no exceptions. So.
Well, we have two really good ones. We have the intent to go armed is the one you're referring to there. I don't remember the other number, but it's what I'm affectionately calling the kitchen sink, because it not only has that, the intent to go armed, but and correcting that, but it also has gun-free zones. It has defense of personal property, the ability to hold someone with use of a weapon, things that we really need to embrace what our Tennessee roots are. When you think about these silly gun-free zones, Dave, that we put stickers everywhere and we make little vulnerabilities, places, spots, oases for the predators. And when 95% of mass killings occur, and over the last 50 years, according to crimeresearch.org, occur in gun-free zones, shouldn't we rethink that?
You would think. The other bill was this was by Todd, House Bill 2064, which did pick up an additional Senate sponsor. Paige Wally is going to sponsor that one. Who's the Senate sponsor for your bill?
Joey Hensler.
Joey Hensler. Okay. So those are two good bills that hopefully both of them get through. Or at least one.
I, to be honest with you, brother, I don't care who passes it, so long as we get it passed.
Right.
We're missing an opportunity here. I heard another of my colleagues, you and I were sitting together, and we heard this said. We said, well, the Democrats were in charge for over 100 years, and they got us in this position. We've only been in place for 15. It takes some time. You and I heard that said recently. And that's the mentality. I get it often, and I try to get along with everybody, and I'm sure this next statement's going to tick some people off. But at what point do you stop compromising and just say, no, I demand my rights? I think, again, many people in politics, there was like 4 of these little go and get drinks and hors d'oeuvres and, hobnob with people in polyester pants again tonight. And, free food, and everybody's blowing smoke up everybody's kilt about how wonderful you are. Oh, Chairman, have you lost weight? Chairman, or you're so smart. Representative. And they've gotten so accustomed to that, they've lost touch with the people they work for. I can't even imagine what DC is. I can't even imagine. Burchett talks about it from time to time. He and I were at a thing together last week. This guy running for county commission, and he'd asked both of us to come, and I spoke a little bit, and Tim spoke a little bit. And, he talks about how messed up it is in D.C. And when you try to fix it, it's not popular. It concerns people that you don't just go along to get along. And, I'm not perfect. For however many folks listening to your show, I'm not perfect. There's nothing perfect about me. But I can guarantee you this, that if you want somebody who will run this back in the other direction with everything in him to try to restore liberty and less government in Tennessee, I'm your only choice. The other folks ain't got it. They just don't have it. You can look them in the eyes, make your own assessment, vote for who you want to. I'm going to love you either way, but I will remember the words I told you so. You can look them in the eyes. They're not going to stand on it.
Monty, I appreciate you taking the time. I know you're busy and on the road. I appreciate what you do in the legislature, and I appreciate you and Denise, taking this opportunity and really not something you wanted to do, not a feather in a cap you were looking for, but something you felt like you had to do, and we appreciate that.
Yeah, well, thank you, Dave. I'm honored to get to do it. I've started doing these legislative updates. I've still got one to do for today, as a matter of fact. It's I think it's important to be a public servant in some form or fashion. Doesn't mean you have to run for office, but it's an honor to get to do that. It is a little frustrating when you see these embedded, crusty politicians that it's become a social club. And, I know that stings when some of them hear that, but they know it's true. They're detached from the people they're supposed to be working for. In many cases, some of them are looking down on the people that they're working for. And, I want to see Tennessee be her greatest. I want to see my kids and grandkids and your kids and grandkids and their children's children grow up old and prosperous and free in Tennessee. I want Kentucky and Louisiana and Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, all the states that touch us, to look in and say something is happening in Tennessee that's different. It's better there. There's peace in the streets. There's brotherly love. And I've said some hard things this evening, I guess, and so maybe I should repent a little bit for that and say this. We need to find a love for our brother that we don't have right now in many cases. And I do think we have to do the iron sharpens iron and argue about points. But
I think we need a lot of tough love.
Huh?
Tough love.
Well, yeah. There's a love often is, hey, stupid, stop doing that. But yeah. There are forces that are intentionally trying to divide us, and I think, I think about probably what is the topic of our time, two topics of our time now nationally. I know I'm going over our time. I apologize. But
hey, you said 30 minutes, not me. So
debt and Epstein. And then you could follow that quickly with endless wars and government overreach in number 4, right? But debt is an existential threat. I do believe that there are people trying to push us to a currency dissolution so that they can own us like cattle in the field. And we must resist that at all costs. I think there's some things that we could do. I think if we listen to Bud Halsey and do a few of those things, it would help. But if we ever reach that currency dissolution point, it's a hard day no matter what else we've said, it mints or whatever else. And then and this Epstein thing, this is a satanic evil. And I'm a Christian, and I'm not trying to be prophetic or I'm just trying to be me. And I'm trying to be cautionary and be the watchman on the wall that you hear me do from time to time. God has not changed. He is the same yesterday, today, and forevermore. Scripture is clear on that. If these sins are taking place of the sexual abuse and trafficking and rape and murder and whatever else, all the Baal worship and Molech worship that people are suggesting is taking place as a part of this, or was taking place, is taking place as part of all these Epstein files. If we don't hold those people accountable, God will hold us accountable. I think it's that simple. I think that if we don't bring justice for those survivors, then God's going to render wrath on us. I think it's that clear. And that we are taught that fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, right?
Right.
I fear the Lord's wrath and judgment on Tennessee and on America. And so, one of the bills we didn't talk about, sanctity of life is important. God hates innocent blood flowing down the streets. We've been doing that in a couple ways. We're going to take that on. It's going to, all the leftists and the libtards are going to lose their minds on this bill. And I hope they'll open their eyes and see that this is just drawing of a line as to what's right and what's wrong. And we must get to that. But our federal government's going to have to act. And if the federal government doesn't act, our states are going to have to act on these, whatever these organizations are that are trafficking human beings. Slavery is unacceptable. Human trafficking is unacceptable. And every righteous man has an obligation to stand up to try to stop it.
Well, let me ask you this, since you brought up the federal government. We get about 40% of our funding from the federal government. Now, we are in better shape than a lot of states in terms of not having a huge amount of debt and pension funds and whatnot, but that's too much reliance on the Titanic, in my opinion.
It is.
And we need to be proactive on that in reducing that level of dependence.
Yeah, I think so. And I think part of that's getting our budget under control. I think the other part of that is that there is no federal money and state money. It's all Dave's money and or Monty's money or our money, Justin's money, Joe's money, whomever. We must stop acquiescing to the unconstitutional whims of the bureaucrats in D.C. We must be willing to say, I'm not going to let little boys go in little girls' bathrooms, but you're going to send me my money either way. And I think there is then becomes a tasking when that you ask the question about who does the Attorney General work for, and I think the Constitution is the correct answer. I think there's an exercise of the 10th Amendment that requires suit, and I think that we probably haven't done enough of that in Tennessee. And it's costly to do those kinds of things, right? Because the federal government has more of our money than the state has of our money. And you have to spend money to accomplish those kinds of things.
Sometimes you just have to say no. I mean, I wouldn't, taking some things to court that you're not willing to compromise. If you're not going to compromise, why take it to court?
Well, I think there's both. I think it starts with no. I agree with you, but you know that you're going to have to fight some of these things in court, and I think there have to be a willingness to do that. I don't know that we've had that, and that's not a slam at our Attorney General. I think he's probably pretty able and capable to do that. I think the establishment, whomever's in charge of that here in Nashville's not been willing to. They're okay with this slippery slope of demise that we're on. If we're not 10 years behind California, we're 20. And
yeah, I don't even know if we're that far. We do have the nullification bill. Bud Halsey and Senator Bolin are bringing back that this year. Bud Halsey's got his UCC bill that's to prevent us in the case of a major financial crisis where people all of a sudden lose their money to the big institutions. And a lot of people don't know about that, but that's, there's some important bills that are in the legislature this session, and people need to be aware of them. And do you have any others? Well, I know you got the annexation bill. Was there any other bills that you wanted to hit on real quick?
The annexation bill is something that one of my county commissions actually started pushing on, in Williamson County, Sumner County. Several counties around the state are pushing on it now, that municipalities are obligating the citizens of the county to cost and tax, if you will, without the citizens of the county having to vote in it. It's taxation without representation kind of thing. And some of that is directly involving annexation. And so that bill deals with that. We tried last year to take on even a little larger piece than just the annexation. And the lobbies pumped lots of money, and walked around to all scare the politicians to death.
I think we lost you there, or you froze up. Okay. Or maybe we'll get him back here in just a second. Anyway, I'm gonna hit a few things. If Monty comes back, then we'll certainly bring him back in. But if not, hey guys, if you want to find out more about Monty, go to fritzfortn.com. That's his website. A lot of good information on there. Like I said, session is in, guys, and there's some bills that you need to be paying attention to. And I'm not going to go over all of these bills. I'm going to just kind of hit the highlights, and there are some good sites for these. For instance, TennesseeFairElections.org. That's where you would go to find out about all the elections bills. So we have like one election integrity bill, the residency bill. Did you know that people cannot be that have never lived in Tennessee in some way, somehow, and I don't quite understand this, end up voting in Tennessee, living overseas? And that's insane. But there's a bill to deal with that. And that is by Renault and Bowling. Jody Barrett and Senator Bowling also have some election bills. There's so many bills having to do with election issues. There's some other gun bills, education bills, especially the homeschool bills. We really have to watch, even if you don't homeschool, a lot of those things impact parental rights. Okay. Anyway, we got Monty back here. Monty, did you have anything you wanted to close out with?
I apologize. I've spoken way too much tonight. Thank you for letting me be on your show. I'm not sure what the signal issue is here, but thank you, Dave, for your time and what you're doing. And please go to our capital.tn.gov. Look at the bills we have. We have some really consequential bills that we're carrying this year. Again, I think that we've led the nation in 4 or 5, maybe 6 areas. And there's a couple bills that we have this year will lead the nation again if we can get them through. That's not my objective. My objective is to do the right thing. But Tennessee ought to lead the nation in all categories, and that's my.
At least the good stuff.
Yep.
At least liberty and less government. That's what we should be leading in.
That's right. That's right.
Well, hey, Monty, I thank you for being with us again. Sorry for keeping you longer than we had talked about, but I do appreciate what you do, and we'll definitely have you back on.
Thank you, Dave.
You have a good night. All right, guys, I'm going to hit just a few things here and give you some upcoming events. So back to anything having to do with elections, you're going to want to go to TennesseeFairElections.org and look that up. Tennessee Stands is great for general information stuff, as is Tennessee Eagle Forum. Tennessee Firearms Association, that's the site you want to go to for anything firearms related in Tennessee. Now, don't waste your time with the NRA. Go to Tennessee Firearms Association. You don't have to be a member. You can get on the website. They'll tell you the bills are coming up, which committees they're in. They got great information on there. Let's see. Like I said, anything having to do with homeschool, you want to go to freeyourchildren.com, or you can go to Free Your Children on Facebook. Tiffany Boyd, she's on top of it. She knows what's going on. Okay. And once again, it's not, even if you don't have kids in homeschool, these are parental rights issues, not just homeschool issues per se. So just keep that in mind. There is a bill that Representative Gino Boso has. House Bill 1423 has to do with the whole gay marriage garbage that was put on our state, or that our state did not fight back in 2015, in my opinion. And this would prevent private individuals from having to perform or solemnize a ceremony. I still think that's one of those things. I mentioned nullification a minute ago. And by the way, the nullification bill, that's important. That's the way you stand up. That's putting teeth in the 10th Amendment. That's what the nullification is. And the nullification bill this year is a process bill, just like it has been for the last couple. Very important bill, guys. So we're going to need your support on that. And if you don't know much about nullification, you need to go to tncss.weebly.com. That is the website where you will get the information on nullification, the history of it. And oh, by the way, those people that tell you it's never worked, they don't know what they're talking about. There's examples of it working all the way back into the early 1800s. And I don't mean 1832. Actually worked then. They still got the tariff lowered. Anyway, there's a lot of good sites, a lot of good information on that site. And guys, we have to, with the way things are headed, we have to have a state that will step up. We have to have a state that will say no to certain things that the federal government's trying to push on us. And yeah, sometimes you can do certain things through the courts, but sometimes you just have to be willing to say no. That's the way the Constitution was designed. It was not designed to, okay, you got to do what the federal government says and then go to court and grovel and hope they see it your way. No, that's the wrong answer. So anyway, there's a lot of good information. Now, give you a heads up. Our show Monday is President's Day. And we're going to have the show at 2:00 instead of 7. Now, we'll probably replay it again at 7. And I'm going to have Walter Kennedy. He is the commander-in-chief. We're going to tell you the whole ugly truth about Lincoln that you didn't hear in school, I guarantee you. But it's true. So that's Monday, 2 p.m. And a couple other things, guys. We are trying to get to 1,000 subscribers. We're at 888. And we'd like to hit 1,000 by the end of the month if possible. And subscriptions are free. Just subscribe, like, share. If we hit that 1,000, it makes it a whole lot easier for us to stay on the air. So we would appreciate you doing that. And we have some other things coming up. H.K. Egerton, and I don't think we have anything ready for this, but H.K. Egerton, he was known as the Black Confederate. We're gonna do a program on him Wednesday, and we're gonna have some people that knew him and worked with him, and we'll do that Wednesday at 7:00 next week. And more information to follow on that and our guest in the future. I appreciate everybody tuning in. By the way, I know we were supposed to have Gary Lowe on tonight, and that was the intent. Hopefully we'll get him on in the future. He decided that didn't want to come on right now. So hopefully down the road we'll get him on. And Gary Lowe is the guy that he's filed the campaign complaint against Marsha Blackburn's campaign for using federal fund, or it appears that she may have used federal funds to run a state race. So we'll see how all that turns out, but hope to get him back on here and sometime in the future. Thanks again. I appreciate everybody tuning in. Subscribe, and we will see you next week. Good night from Big Rock in Stewart County. Thank you.